Good evening, and welcome to another tale of the bizarre, metaphysical, and supernatural. This week's tale coincidentally follows the season of love, which seems to be growing ever more a distant fancy, to occasionally take one as they daydream than to be pursued when faced with the responsibility of love and its reality, a reality that can at times be warped by the sways of our day-to-day consciousness and is so very shaped by the pressures of the world. Some pressures create delicate facades of success, other pressures break us through the veil of our warped society, only to find that real happiness, real love, lays on an entirely different plane. Thank you to the anonymous sender of this story from Minneapolis, Minnesota, although the date wasn't included. And thank you to my listeners. Please continue submitting accounts of your bizarre tales, and I will continue to read them. Now, on to our story, titled The Woman of My Dreams. Blonde hair, soft lips, pale skin, dark rings under her eyes, but for some reason it made her all the more attractive. There was a vignette around her face, a fuzziness pervading the peripheral. They were in a bright room. Frosted opaque windows filtering the shimmering sunlight, passing between leaves, casting speckles of shadow behind her. He was stationary, near paralytic, yet more happy than he had ever been. The joy was palpable, and she felt it too. He didn't know how he knew. It was just an unsaid understanding passing between them. It was a telepathic bond they shared in knowing that everything would be okay. That was until Roger awoke. The white, sagging popcorn ceiling above him, some areas from subpar application, others from the browning of water damage. He sighed and turned over to grab his phone. 10 missed messages. He already knew what they were about and who they were from. He still had an alarm for 5 a.m. and still woke up an hour earlier than his alarm. Bringing his second pillow to rest over his eyes, a moan escaped unintentionally. However, mid-vocalization, he felt some small relief, so he decided to continue it longer and longer till his lungs gave out, and he started again for a second time. He was awake, and there would be no going back to sleep. Pushing himself to sit at the edge of his bed, he slipped on some sandals and shuffled to the electric kettle where he warmed some tap water. It didn't matter what time of day or night it was, the city never slept, and neither did the constant rush of cars 40 stories below his one-room apartment. He found a begrudging comfort in the background noise of the years, yet this morning the unabating sounds felt tired and played out. He felt tired and played out. After mixing some sugar and recently expired milk in his coffee, he shuffled to the elevator for a morning walk, something he had never really done before but felt like attempting today in his bathrobe and slippers. His warm mug accompanied him on his early adventure. As he rounded the dim fluorescent T-junction at the end of his hall, he spotted an open elevator, and who was unfortunately inside. Fresh, trimmed, cheery, and proper, his unintentional nemesis, Bartley B. He was proud of his last name, too, and would use it as a pun whenever possible. He even had his own monthly rotating motto. Last month, it was something like, "The man who will always be early to work," and the month before that, something equally inane. Most people couldn't stand him. The bosses tolerated him because the moment someone would play a prank at work, he'd be the first to snitch out whoever did it. Usually the wrong person because everyone knew what kind of guy he was, so they'd feed him the wrong info to make him look worse. He was a subpar try-hard who knew nothing else. He was the tap-dancing monkey managers and workers alike could never accept because he didn't know how to be one of either group. It would have made Rogers sad had he not been at the receiving end of Bartley B's snitching himself, and now his overexpressive face and the flabby arms attached to it held the elevator door open and waved for Roger to join him on the ride down. "Roger, is that you? Oh, I say, Roger! Roger's eyes darted to the rows of sardine-packed doors lining the hallway, any of them liable to be thrown open by a burly iron worker who had an hour left to sleep off an impossible amount of alcohol before work, now being awoken by Bartley's performative shrieks. "Shh! Yes, it's me!" Roger hissed before putting a hand over his mug to prevent sloshing and lightly jogged to Bartley's side in the elevator. "I say, I haven't seen you in what? It must be years." "It's been a week." "Well, word around the office is today is the last day you can come in for work, and unless it's pajama day." "No, it's not, Bartley, and no, I'm not coming in to work." "But why not? DocuCorp is the largest employer in the region. I'd think you'd at least want to turn in your 2 months' notice before leaving." "Only you would turn in a 2 months' notice, Bartley, and I am well aware." "It's just so bizarre. It's strange. People will talk about it, you know. Say you went nuts straight off the reservation." "For a day they will. Then some other sad sap with the IQ of room temperature will take my place and do an even better job than me." "What do you mean? No one can do as good a job as you at whatever it is you do." "Oh, knock it off, Bartley. I can't take it anymore." "Can't take what?" "You know what I mean. You do it all the time. The plays for social, menial, hierarchical improvements. The jockeying for another rung on the ladder by learning who your boss's favorite team is when you couldn't give a damn about the sports. That's a rather uncharitable interpretation of what I do at work, and may I say, an unteamly thing." "Do you even hear yourself? Unteamly? What does that mean?" "Well, yes, we have the team at work and we want to be on the team so we can get the job done. Not being on the team is unteamly." "Bartley, what is it you even do?" "I'm the assistant to the compliance supervisor of office supply, ecological practices, and sustainability action." "Nothing. All you do is walk from your desk to the break room to chat for a half hour, walk back to the desk for a virtual meeting, type some nonsense Excel sheet, then walk back to the break room in a never-ending process to remind people what your last name rhymes with, and so the cycle continues until lunch. After lunch, and you're so very eager to start it all again the next day. Do you ever think about it all? Do you ever wonder why we all live in the same tower block of one-room apartments and have made no progress in life, no matter how hard we try? Do you ever wonder, Bartley?" "I say, are you feeling quite all right?" No, I am not. I am the most depressed I've ever been, and I don't know why you aren't." "I don't know how you can be depressed. Think of all the sorry vagrants living on the streets, scrounging for food. You can afford tea, or is that coffee? Well, whatever's in your mug, and you have a roof over your head. Isn't that enough reason for joy?" "No, Bartley, that's where you and I differ. I want a woman in my life. I want to have a couple of small Rogers running around. I want the life my parents had, and for some reason I found myself in an apartment complex the size of a mountain on the 40th floor of Block D, subsection 5, with zero prospects other than to sort never-ending slushes of data. I'm tired, Bartley, and frankly, my mind has worn far too thin." "Be careful of that sort of talk. You can find yourself in a straitjacket with the rest of the crazies." The elevator slowed to the first floor, doors shuttering open. "Look, Roger, to live this life you need to be more like me. I know what people think about me. I have 2 ears and can hear their not-so-subtle jabs very well. I live this life because after another 10 years, I'll have enough to think about marriage, and maybe then I can afford 1 child myself. It's not ideal, but what else am I to do? I like sleeping in a bed and not being locked away, and if you had any sense, you'd take the elevator back up, slip on some clothes, and sit at that desk. Catch up on some work, message some friends, and send your HR rep some company points for not firing you yet. As for me..." Bartley gasped, then ran through the dusty beige lobby, calling behind him, "I'm going to be late to the morning break room chat with the pals. Think about what I said." He disappeared into the street of morning coffee vendors, 24-hour neon signage, and the honks of motorists driving inches over the course of hours. To Roger, the streets were as silly as his life. But Bartley's case had made sense to the last lone centurions of logic guarding the sanity of his mind. His argument overcame any jealousies felt for Bartley's ability to completely subserviate himself to the company's whims. If Roger wanted to meet the woman of his dreams, he'd have to get back to work and try to push through the corporate non-ethics, the inconveniences of socialite convenience. He would have to try to play the game. A white gown with blue spots. She sat by a frosted window in a black chair. She seemed to pass him at first, or maybe it was him passing her, stationary for some reason. She then appeared again by his side, caressing his face. She whispered something sweet, but he couldn't make out the words. Roger felt safe. That was until the alert for his bus stop rang, and the screech of the doors sliding open awoke him. Roger jolted from his seat, apologizing to the nameless faces of other commuters surrounding him who begrudgingly stepped out of the way so he could hop off the bus and stand before the DocuCorp Western Commerce building. The DocuCorp building was hailed by many architectural digests as a marvel of postmodern globalist non-denominational non-descriptive architecture. To everyone else, its characteristics were overwhelmingly reminiscent of a swamp cooler air conditioning unit. It was large, leaked from the subpar plumbing, and occasionally shuttered for no reason, as he did now, at the thought of a whole week gone. What had he done? Roger had blown off work, and for what reason? Because he felt it was all pointless? Because he couldn't bear to force himself out of bed? Temporary insanity is what it was. Roger supposed it was the first and last time he would do such a thing, as his mind readjusted to the normal flow of corporate consciousness. Yes, his stint was temporary insanity and should be regarded as such. Just from making the same movements he used to make every day, he felt his depressed futility of modern life retreating. He walked in, past the large circular logo and his pretentious typeface. No, that wasn't right. It was the world-renowned logo and a revolutionary typeface, or so HR had said in their monthly email. He scanned in at the grimy employee gate, its motors slowly opening the idiotic turnstile to... No. It was a protective measure for the safety of the building, and by tracking his movement, the facilities team could track him for the purposes of fire evacuation. So him scanning through every door wasn't annoying, it was safe, and safe was good. Roger could not be negative. Negativity wouldn't get Roger anywhere. Only his legs could get him where he needed to go, which was his cubicle. The cubicle wasn't as small as some of the others, but its side was still open to all who walked past, hung over its dividers, or looked through the surveillance cameras above him. While he was in his cubicle, he was to perform as everyone else performed. He looked down at his to-do pile, and strangely, it wasn't that full at all. He had been gone a week, and there had only been maybe 5 papers demanding his attention. He could get them done in one coffee-fueled afternoon. He shook his head and chuckled, muttering under his breath, "No one can do as good a job at whatever it is you do." He then sat in his chair and booted his computer. Roger paused after the updates resolved, and he saw the notifications on his desktop. In his team app, he discovered an overflowing inbox of 1,137 messages. Did he really message people this much throughout the day? Was this the most important part of his job? He thought the data crunching of his to-do pile took precedence, but with how many messages there were from nearly every department, surely writing passable posts postulating as a working-class esoterist and commenting praise on everyone else doing the same, surely this wasn't the majority of how he passed his time. Was it? The depression returned. The desire to be great and to do something great, not for the praise of others, but for the respect of his own intelligence, yet to be trapped in an unending grind of social hierarchy games, weighed his limbs in a morose malaise. The logical defenses of his brain to rebrand annoyances as benefits had no answer to fight against the depression. Even that portion of him conceded that the disparity between work and social graces was too great a gap to bridge, and there was still an inkling of Bartley's sage advice at work. Roger remembered that if he had any sense, he would catch up on his work, message his friends, and send some company points to Harold, his HR rep. Starting with the easiest one because he thought it was pointless, he sent a generous amount of points to Harold. Roger then went to his inbox and began sending brief replies, rotating in one-word exclamations of joy or sorrow, or sympathy or annoyance or anger, all performative, all to meet the expectation of the person who sent it. Rotating between 1 of 10 front-page news articles on his computer's news feed to send back to them in a reply. Even with this non-committal strategy, he found that he was only able to make it through 100 conversations in an hour, and he still had about 400 more to go. That's when a message from Harold, his HR rep, popped up as a priority message on his screen. It read, "Hey Roger, glad to see you're back in the driver's seat. Is everything okay? Today was the last day before termination. I'm sorry to say, there is a strike now on your record, which will come up in our employee reviews, but everyone here likes you, and we want to see you succeed. I checked your file and saw you have quite a bit of points saved up. On a completely different note, the other HR reps really like you as well, and would love if you showed your gratitude to them as well. We're all rooting for you." Roger reread the message several times to make sure he wasn't going crazy. This was a shakedown for company points. So what? The points didn't mean anything to Roger. That's why he never spent them. So what if he gave them the points? Didn't matter. It didn't. Roger had sat silent in his chair, stewing, knee bouncing, grimace souring. He pounced back to his keyboard, began typing random expletives before deleting them, then sent the rest of his points to the other HR reps. For a brief moment, Roger thought, was this a reportable offense? Who did he have to talk to? Ethics? Compliance? They were on the same floor as HR and ate lunch together each day, laughing at times, at other times lowering to hushed seriousness as they would dispassionately stare at passing employees like cannibalistic priests eyeing potential sacrifices. No. There was no one to talk to who was outside the parasitic influence of HR. "Is that Roger?" Bartley walked over with an entourage of equally unattractive, uninteresting people whose personalities more closely matched the ingenuity of a brand cereal box than a living human being. At the tone of Bartley's voice, the clack of their shoes, their soul-sapping presence, Roger's mood became considerably worse, and as a result, his mind felt stretched, strained, delicately exposed, and unfortunately positioned to be maximally irritated. As I was telling you earlier, Roger here had a bit of a mental break. Didn't you, Roger? But I caught him in the elevator this morning and consoled him, advised him to get back in the driver's seat and keep at it. After all, one of his good friends, we live on the same floor. Bartley's voice faded, and Roger's heartbeat intensified. Here he was, his cubicle's only exit blocked by the gossiping heartbeat of the company, and his struggle with the game everyone else seemed to love, but he found futile and destructive, now was the subject of ridicule. He, Roger, was the subject of performative, backhanded, barely disguised ridicule. He realized how unbearably hot it was under his collar. When he went to adjust it, He could feel the sweat accumulating along his neck and the stubble of his unshaven exit that morning. The light seemed a little brighter, and while Bartley and his gang's voices had gone all but mute, there was an unexplainable high-pitched noise chirping from somewhere in the room. Or perhaps not this room. Maybe it was the next room. The noise became a fixation, as Roger now had to find it. So he stood from his desk and pushed past the mute moving mouths so he could find the noise. It was more interesting than Bartley anyways, or at least Roger hoped it was. A right-hand turn, up some stairs, then a left turn down an adjunct hallway. Canvases of vague abstract scenery splashes made by a lazy brush and an even lazier artist flanked his stumble to find the noise. The speckled pattern of the carpet floor spun beneath him, the lighter parts sparkling as the early stars would amongst an evening sky. The faint smell of burnt toast grew as he approached the noise. He turned the final corner to the department's break room, where he found Harold standing in front of the unopened microwave, crying out in painful beeps to have its door opened, and a badly blackened, previously frozen egg sausage breakfast sandwich now desiccated by the inattentive, uncaring nature of the Widow Pete HR rep standing in front of it, typing away at the team messaging app on his phone. "I say, you look rather pale." At Bartley's hand on his shoulder, Roger forcefully readjusted to reality at hand, his words piercing every part of his sweat-drenched body all at once. "I'm not having a stroke. Harold burned a sandwich." Roger's vision then blurred, his body losing countenance, his legs disappearing somewhere beneath. The ceiling vertigoed outward before he blacked out. There was nothing, until, in the fog, there was something. Someone. A woman. She walked with a small bounce to her step. She didn't seem to mind talking, and he didn't seem to mind listening. To him, she was a birth of warmth in a cold, sterile room. He couldn't move. Or was it that he wouldn't move? Either way, she seemed to understand his pain, and by providing comfort, seemed to be pushing away her own pain. Was it love that they felt for each other, or was it a temporary uniting against the forces combining against them? Either way, Roger had never been happier. That was, until he awoke in a hospital. "I think we got him back. Roger, can you hear me? You had a fall at work. Apparently you passed out. Roger, can you hear us?" The doctor stood over him with the light passing between his eyes. Should he be blinking? Should he be showing any emotion? He didn't feel like he should. He didn't really feel like doing anything at all. "Roger, blink twice if you can understand me." No, he thought. No, I'm done with that. Maybe if my eyes feel particularly fuzzy, but otherwise I think I'm just going to stay here and not move a muscle. "He's not blinking, sir. Are we looking at PVS?" "Perhaps. He could just be catatonic. We'll need to run some tests. Keep him under watch and monitor for symptoms. I'm going to schedule some time with you." Their words were boring. The view of the stained white walls were boring. But like a man standing on an island in the middle of his mind, with each neurological bridge once used to talk, walk, explain, work, all of them had been cut, and he now stood peaceably alone. The alone part felt cold. It was the bitter part ruining the sweet freeness he felt in his mental collapse. Though, despite that part, sitting in the island of his mind somehow opened his world to boundless heights. His imagination flowed and formed portals of thought far more enjoyable than the reality he had left behind him. The reality that moved by quickly. His track on time lost meaning. His reason for caring, perhaps, having never been there. At one moment, his eyes perceived the hospital room, at the next, the back of a van. At the next, the wheeling of his chair into a new hospital, this one filled with rather strange-looking residents, all in gowns. Was he in a gown as well? It didn't really matter, but the freedom of the loose-fitting gown did feel nice. There was something familiar about the gown, though. He had seen the pattern before, and for some reason, the pattern, the walls, the glass, it did matter. Suddenly, his vision started shaking. His wheelchair was being moved. He felt a second pulse vibrate through the handles into the back of his chair, a parallel harmony to his own, quickening his heartbeat. In the uncrowded corner of the room, his vision was propped to face a chair, a window, and from stage left, the one who had wheeled him to the corner. The woman of his dreams sat sweetly cross-legged in front of him. From Roger's still slackened face, his eyes broke their torpid state to lock with hers, and in their understanding formed the first of Roger's mental bridges, over which her kindred spirit reached out in beautiful calligraphic swirls. She, too, had lived on an island, and so they mentally met and embraced. Blonde hair, soft lips, pale skin, dark rings under her eyes, but for some reason it made her all the more attractive. There was a vignette around her face, a fuzziness pervading the peripheral. They were in a bright room, frosted opaque windows filtering the shimmering sunlight passing between leaves, casting speckles of shadow behind her. He was stationary, near paralytic, yet more happy than he had ever been. The joy was palpable, and she felt it too. It was a telepathic bond they shared in knowing that everything would be okay. Dear listener, whenever you next contemplate the love you have in your life and or the love you desire, try reaching out with your soul. It is an underutilized method of calling others that once upon a time all our ancestors used. Perhaps in the face of an overwhelming dystopian reality, we must also face that there are a great many people who find ways to mentally adapt to it, to lie themselves into the hope and cope of finding love when the only true love that can be found for the romantic, the human who defies the cold reptilian institutions propagating misery in their approximations of social connections. Perhaps the only true love can be found in the insanity of breaking away from their cold economical ecosystems and instead connecting with the inherent spirit in all of us. Perhaps by each of us reaching out, we will find our true loves. Beware reaching out under the duress of a fragile mental state. Finding your love is important, but you should try to keep your sanity while doing it.